And we're back. All right, 242 Better on Draft podcast. This is the interview with Bryant Goulding. Oh my gosh, Goulding. Oh, I suck. Um,
Keep drinking, Ken.
I no, it's not that. I feel it's the Baff and Boffin thing. I just get it mixed up. Let's. You know what, Bryant? How do you say your last name?
Goulding. You
Goulding.
nailed it.
Goulding. Got it. All right, we are gonna do a quick round robin. See what everyone is drinking now. Wendy, what are you drinking?
I actually went through my cellar to see if I could find Rhinegeist in there. It doesn't last at my house very long. And I found a Mommy Bay Brewing Blitzen flavored ale, so I thought I would go that route.
At least Ohio, right?
Yep.
Robert.
I am still working on the same two, although I am now adding in the Dragon's Milk uh, bourbon whiskey.
All right.
Get some ginger beer to mix with it.
Dan, what do you got?
I switched over to really hard to find beer these days, probably because of the month it is, Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
There you go, Nick.
Still drinking my Devil Dog and my Blow Your Face from Roke. They go good hand in hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound good to mix. For me,
Not mixed, but separate.
I mean, yeah, sure. We got for me, I've got Slangria from Rhinegeist, and I've got Wiffle, wit beer. So I'm guessing the Wiffle is named after the Wiffle Ball events that go on over there. Is that correct?
No, it's named for a subtle breeze.
Oh, well,
It's slightly different just because it's a very light, crisp, refreshing whip beer.
now I just look like an asshole. Why don't you tell me what you're drinking over there?
I'm drinking a Data. It's our Happy Holiday Ale. Nice balance of malt and hops. Keep trying to get in the spirit.
That's
Awesome.
actually my favorite holiday ale.
You know, speaking of big breweries, that Mommy Bay Brewery is just humongous over there out in Toledo. It might be Mommy officially, but I that's one of the few breweries in Ohio I've been to. I've been to that and Twin Oast, and then the one on Put in Bay. So I'm definitely lacking in my Ohio. Oh, there's another one in like Podunk, Ohio, where the corn is, which is most of Ohio. My question for you, because you were talking about way back you were home brewing. Were you home brewing when you were working for Dogfish Head and all these other companies, Golden Road, or did that kind of like fade off as you got into the sales area?
Yeah, once I realized I could represent beer that was way superior in quality to what I could brew, and I had access to brewers that were doing, I think what appealed to me about home brewing was deciphering what you can do and what goes into it, both in ingredients and in process. That I scratched that itch at breweries. I stopped home brewing. It's a really labor intensive way to make 5 gallons at a time. Um, so while I was at Anderson Valley, I was still homebrewing, and then that was it. Like I homebrewed with Jim, Matt, our head brewer. In the early days, we mashed in. He had a sand wedge that he would mash in with, and he made great beer. But it was, me driving the recipe and me following instructions. My wife is a great cook because she's a dentist and she likes to follow protocol. And I like to be creative, and I can't do the same thing twice. And that's the opposite of a brewer's skill set. So I like to know what goes into the beer, and I like to know what we're working on the brew side out of intellectual curiosity, but I'm not the one that should be doing it. Besides once a year where my efforts are guided by a brewer that knows what they're doing.
What do you think has, because you've been open for a decent amount in Ohio and you've definitely seen the craft beer boom, but I think Ohio has seen an explosion that a few other states, most states have not seen. What do you think kind of gave to that way for a lot of new breweries in Ohio to open?
I don't know why because I wasn't here.
Okay.
But it seemed to me that there just was a lag. If you look at the Pacific Northwest or the West Coast or even New England, there's a lag in the Midwest and a lag in the South. I don't know why that was, but culturally, maybe they're drinking other things. I know there were some legal challenges, but in Ohio, there were not. So I think that once breweries open, it's more appealing to those that experience it, and therefore there's a network effect. So, Rhinegeist was the 13th brewery to open up. I hope that we played a role in influencing others that did. I know that Dogfish and Sierra and Russian River and a lot of other breweries, modern times have influenced us, and continue to. So I feel like it's one of those things where you walk into a brewery, if you don't have access to a brewery and you have to go out of your way to go find one, you're less likely to be ensconced and to understand the appeal of making of taking that pivot and bring a brewery to life. And now there are 60 breweries in Cincinnati, and I think over 200 in Ohio. And I don't know what's different about Michigan, but Michigan is one of those places where, not just Founders and Bells, but there's always been craft brewing culture there strong. And I don't know Ohio well enough to. I've only been there 8 years, and I spent most of my life on the coast. So I don't have a good answer there. I'm glad it changed.
I
It's a
mean,
great place.
I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I think there's a lot of thoughts and theories as to how the industry has grown, and I think there's a lot of thoughts and theories on how the industry is what's going to happen in the next year and a half. As we reach the next winter, there's a lot of darkness I think we have in ahead of us as craft beer fans. But I don't want to talk about darkness. I want to talk about a question that we have from the chat. Tito asks, can you talk about your brewery's journey in deciding, brewing, and selling your version of Black is Beautiful collective beer? Also, was this a one-time brew for Rhinegeist, or do you plan on making it again?
We, with all of the tempest that's happened in the last few months, basically wanted to make change that was not just a beer, though Black is Beautiful is an awesome platform to make an immediate impact and to show our support for a community that we feel strongly that needs historical reevaluation of the levels of support that are given. So we brewed Black is Beautiful and donated to a nonprofit called Mortar, who is an entrepreneurial platform that invests in Black and minority-owned businesses. It's kind of a training program that allows you to take idea and turn it into execution with the support and programming platform. And there's businesses in Cincinnati that are operating that we know of, and we know the founders. They're in our same neighborhood, and we met with them and we said, we don't just want to do this, put it on social media, and then feel like we check the box and we're done. So we got their input, leaders in our community that we're close with, a few chefs in local restaurants and the leaders in Mortar, and got their guidance on, and put together a diversity committee. So we're creating an internal dialogue about the ways in which we need to make change as a business. And this is a part of the dialogue that we have ongoing with how we create a great culture and a great business to begin with. But how we can best educate, reach out to the community, make sure everyone feels welcome, and be a better, more inclusive place, more diverse place. So our diversity committee I've been working very closely with them to make sure that we're going to make an impact, and it doesn't happen overnight. But so Black is Beautiful was a collaboration that we did a few months ago, and that's probably a one-time deal for us. Though I think Weathered Souls is going to continue making it, and it was just an awesome program and an awesome beer and an idea. But for us, the change is really in evaluating what we can do as a culture internally to make sure that we are creating opportunity for bringing a more diverse set of people in, and then nourishing those people through our organization so that we are more diverse, and with our community, making sure that we're making a positive impact. So we really use this as a catalyst to grow up and see the world a little bit differently and invest in that change. And it's a employee-led initiative with leadership's buy-in that is moving towards impact. But I'll have more to share in the next few months. But they have done a deep dive on researching what best practices are, and we sent out an internal survey to get feedback on the hotspots and where we need to change. And we're prioritizing those into a strategic plan, which is policies and procedures with employees, and then outreach to communities, and then hiring practices. So with that sort of structure, we're hoping to be a different company over time. Good
All right.
question.
Yeah, that was Tito in the chat. Thank you so much, Tito. Guys, you can listen and react and talk to us and our guests live on betterondraft.tv or facebook.com/betterondraft Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget, next week, which is the 13th, Friday the 13th, we will not be live on Friday. We will be live Thursday with Greg Hall, formerly of Goose Island, Virtue Cider, as well as a representative of Goose Island to take your questions about Goose Island. But I'm going to pass it over to Wendy because I have a question that Wendy wanted to ask.
Yeah, so you have talked quite a bit about community and the culture and how you might want to make sure that the company is giving back to the area that you're in. And I was just wondering, with your local or with your ingredients, do you guys like to source local as much as possible, or is that, I don't know, like I know in Michigan we have a very large hop presence, so I just wondered, is that something you guys are able to do?
We we do. We get our malt for most of our beers. The scale is not locally produced, so we couldn't get malted locally until recently, where Origin Malts is a company based out of Columbus that's actually taken an old grain, an old type of barley, and organically grown it to yields that make sense. And we're working with local producers to do exactly that. We go out to hop harvest each year, besides this year, which this year just doesn't count, for a lot of reasons.
Right.
But we go out to Yakima and Willamette, and we've sent Jim, our head brewer, had been to New Zealand to meet with hop farmers and to rub hops and get to know the differences in techniques and kilning. And we make sure we need the best products possible, because local can't come at the expense of the quality of our beer. And the level of hop production and the scale won't fuel brands that are that big. But we do wet hop beers each year. With this year we did 3, one with a farm from Indiana, one with a farm from Michigan, and one with a local farm in New Richmond in Cincinnati. So we do wet hop beers, which they go into the brew, within 24 hours. And we're working on an Ohio only beer with this Origin malt and with Ohio grown hops. So primarily because the agricultural industry locally, depending on how you define local, if you define local as grown in the Midwest, we get most of our grain from Minnesota. Some of it's also Canada, I think. But hops I'm doubtful, and maybe this is not the right perspective, but I'm doubtful that the humid environment that we have at least in Ohio, is going to provide the bounty and quality of hops that Yakima and Willamette do. And I hope I'm wrong, but it's really incredible the quality of hops that we get from there. And hops are such a paramount aspect of our beer that it's hard to lower your standards for locality, though it's an important part of the process too. And I'm not saying that the hops that we get from local producers are lower quality. They're just different and unpredictable at this stage. But we're nourishing that as much as we can, because 5-10 years from now, I think there will be a more vibrant industry. And it's awesome. These producers some are putting hop vines out in their backyard. And what Origin Malts, if you look them up, they're making big waves. They've got big plans to malt barley in Columbus, which would be the closest we could get anything. And we have a warehouse up there, so we'd be running beer up to our warehouse and picking up malt and running it back, and that would be very efficient. So it's something that's on our radar and we are invested in, but it's not realistic for breweries beyond microbreweries, I think. And if you're the quality variation is pretty high at this point, and that's not what people want out of beer. You want something that when you buy that beer, you know what it's going to be, and that consistency is really important. But we're investing to get there someday, hopefully.
Cool.
If you guys haven't gathered, I'm not good at short answers.
That
It's
is
okay. We aren't either.
that is perfectly fine. Now I believe from like going through some of obviously like kind of going back to some of our previous episodes, I think now you are the second brewery in 2 weeks that we've talked to who has said that one of their inspirations has been from the California brewery Firestone Walker. The other, I believe, was Pigeon Hill, a Michigan local brewery that we just had on back on episode one, or not one, 240. I guess talk to us about what it is that Firestone Walker has done to inspire and I guess help evolve your establishment, despite them being now 2,300 miles away from where you are today.
Not a short answer. Matt Brindleton is one of the most engaging brewers you'll meet. He is a really hardworking dude who cares a lot about the industry, invests a lot of his time in learning and sharing that knowledge. When I called Matt and told him I was moving from Dogfish Head to go open a brewery, I was driving to LA to start working at Golden Road. And he said, come by Firestone, check it out. And he showed me a 2-hour tour of their entire brewery. This is before they'd done the expansion of a couple of years ago, before 805 has exploded for them, and showed me every cradle that runs wires and why it's efficient to plan that out all in advance, to stainless drains that catch bolts and spanner wrenches that don't go down the drain, and what's worth investing in and what's not. And it was an amazing wealth of knowledge that I was just a sales guy that had a dream to go build a brewery, and he was really open about. So, and David Walker is another one who invests a lot of his time in preaching to the beer community, his wisdom of what that he's experienced. And there's a humility and a focus on beer and people that I think I really respect. But I also respect Firestone from a different perspective, from a sales perspective, because they were kind of just another brewery in the early 2000s. They were brewing nectar ales and contract brewing beer for Trader Joe's, and double barrel ale was not that. They didn't have an IPA really, and they just had this. There wasn't anything that was really standing out, but they were using that oak method to make beer, and they pivoted on that when Matt came on board, and they started barrel aging beer. And for their 10th anniversary, they came out with Firestone 10, and now I think they're on like 24.
26 or 20, yeah, something like that. It just got released.
And I was a consultant working at Accenture, and I would ride the BART train back to San Francisco and get off South of Market and walk 2 blocks to City Beer Store, which is owned by Craig Wathan, which is this little basement of a beer shop that any of you would love because it had the best selection of beers sitting there. And I'm a visual branding guy that dreamt about, working in the beer world someday at that point. And Firestone 10 came out, and Brandon Borgel, who now is the head of sales at Boochcraft in San Diego, a blowing up kombucha brand, and has been a lot of places in between, was there representing the brand and telling this story about this beer that came in a box, I think was wax dipped, but that doesn't really matter. Scrolled around the bottle was this description of the 8 or so different types of beers, Sticky Brown and Imperial Stout, and all of the constituent threads that were woven together, put together with influence from the winemakers in their region in Paso Robles, into this beer that they celebrated for their anniversary. And on this random Thursday night where they had the Firestone event, that beer, it was like the tulip craze. People were like, I'll buy one. I bought. So my buddy and I cobbled together $120 or something and bought 6 bottles. I watched 7 cases disappear between 40 people overnight because, and it wasn't the brand, it wasn't, it was just this moment of, I've never had anything so complex and delicious. It has always sat with me. So I guess my respect for what Firestone does is they really care about beer, and they throw this invitational festival that's magical and has some of the best breweries in the country that go out to their little wine country. They're in the middle of sort of nowhere. It's hard to get there. You fly into LA, you're still a few hours away. And yet they've built this culture around quality, and basically any beer that they brew, I like. So it's kind of that easy. Same thing with Fremont, same thing with Reuben's Brews, same thing with Odell's, same thing with Half Acre and Pipeworks, same thing with Other Half and Treehouse and Cellar Maker. And there's certain, I love beer, and I love people that put their all into doing what they love to do, and we get to experience that with them. So I think Firestone, they hit on something really amazing with 805 that's tripled the size of their brewery, and that's giving. It's just a very simple beer, but the way that they've branded that is also really authentic and cool. So once again, not a short answer, but that's why I like Firestone.
As one of your beers is called, I would say that is the truth. So last year, Rhinegeist obviously hit a significant milestone in producing more than 100,000 barrels. You guys hit 106,000 in 2019, which was second only to Great Lakes Brewing out of Cleveland, who was at just over 124,000 last year. The one difference I wanted to ask you about is in terms of distribution. Now, Great Lakes Brewing has their beer in DC and 13 states, including Ohio. Now, obviously, including Ohio for you and Rhinegeist, is that you guys have distribution in only 7 states. And it's certainly not there's not a knock on the distribution footprint, but I think for me, just more of a nod of accomplishment of the amount of beer that's distributed and produced for a smaller footprint than what Great Lakes Brewing does. What I want to know is that in terms of your beer and in terms of distribution, is it something where you want to see your beer nationwide, or is there a stopping point where you say, this is good enough?
No, nationwide. I mean, I lived in California. My brother still lives there. It's a great state. I don't think they need our beer. Texas either. Maybe someday we get there. But I think the managing a brand is a little bit about managing scarcity. New Glarus is a model that is extreme in that sense, but it's given their brand staying power. I will buy New Glarus when I'm in Wisconsin. I can't get it anywhere else. You're an idiot if you don't. If you like beer and that's how you operate. You cross the border and have access to beers, Ken, and you bring up $200 worth of beer. Like I'm the same guy. Like and I as a sales rep, I used to be out there in accounts all the time, and it was problematic. When I moved out of San Francisco, I left in a Volvo, and I left 7 cases of beer in my buddy's brewery cold box because I couldn't take it anywhere. So when I go back there, we drink together, and sometimes we drank a Firestone 10 last time I was out there at a natural wine bar. Anyway, what was the question?
Whether or not you want to see if in terms of distribution, is what you have enough of what you want, or do you want to see your beer spread out into more states and possibly nationwide?
Yeah, I think it's irresponsible to grow your footprint further than you have the means to manage it. So we've incrementally, like we launched Wisconsin last year, and that was just Madison and Milwaukee, and not greater Wisconsin. And so we've had luck when we launched Pittsburgh a few years ago. We just launched State College on top of that, and Erie. So we like to play, like, I don't know if you've played the game of Risk, but basically you need to get a stronghold. You need to get people aware of our brand. You need to have someone there presenting the brand. You need to manage the wholesalers' expectations and understand what they need in terms of support to get the beer out there so that it turns, so that it's fresh. a 6-month-old IPA is not going to win anybody over.
Right.
And so we've been intentional about, we self-distribute in Cincinnati and Columbus. We expect a lot out of our sales team to build great relationships. And that is a model that spreads only so far. So I think we will incrementally add, and the counterpoint to that is we do want to continue to grow. You grow to pay salary increases and continue to invest in your business. And those are things that we want people to grow. We want upward mobility. So culturally, it's important to grow. Growing it for the expense, just to grow, it doesn't make any sense. So no national growth plans, and I think we've been pretty contiguous. We're rolling out Chicago in the spring. We jumped from Indiana up to Wisconsin because we wanted to outflank a major city like Chicago. And at some point, I would expect that we're going to roll into Michigan, because as much as there is a rivalry between our states, I think there's a mutual respect that good beer is brewed on both sides of the border.
I would agree.
But no national aims. Texas and California would be their own countries if they were untethered from the rest of the states. So do they need our Cincinnati brewed beer? Probably not ever. But are there, I think we make great hoppy beer. I'd put it up blind, and we do this on a regular basis with our tasting panels up against our competitors. We make an interesting fruited ale portfolio. We make nice light beers. We do ciders, which we're launching new variations. And Swizzle is more dry than the semi-dry. So if the semi-dry was sweet for your preferences, Swizzle you may enjoy more. And then we do.
Yeah, that was the one that took me a little longer to finish. I'm also not too happy because the nutritional information is on the can, and I looked at what I drank.
Yeah, that's required for ciders. But we do sours. We do a lot that I think gives us a lot of angles to be relevant in a lot of places. Though we're in no hurry to get everywhere.
I want you, before Rob continues, talk to me about this Slangria, because I'm about to crack it open and try it. But looking at the label, and now mind you, as everyone who listens to this show knows, I'm not an IPA guy. So I looked at your IPA line and I said no, thank you. And it's not of fault of your guys's. It's just what it is. But I saw an ale with apple, pomegranate, blueberry, and lime. Who came up with this? And I guess the other question is why.
So we have a fruited ale portfolio that Bubbles was the first version of, and that was a peach cranberry rosé cider beer hybrid. And since then, we've added flavor profiles. Wowie is a pineapple passion fruit, Zango is tangerine and mango, and Slangria is our kind of winter season earthier colors and flavor palette for the colder weather. Sangria is obviously a wine cocktail blend that's delicious and celebratory. And we felt like for cooler weather, what better way to play than with something that mimicked that, but didn't completely go that route. There's no spices in there, but there's a little bit of spiciness from the pomegranate.
Yeah, I'm getting mostly apple. And that's really it, but it's also probably the fact that I'm down 2 ciders, so I just probably taste a lot of apple in my mouth. I know Dan has a question that he's been wanting to ask you.
Yeah, you actually kind of piqued my interest when you were saying states like Texas or California don't need your beer, but would you ever be open to collaborating with some of the heavy hitters out of there? Like think like a Bottle Logic out of Anaheim, a Jester King. They both do a lot of collaborations with pretty much everybody across the country, big or small. Is that something you've ever thought about or reaching out to either of those breweries to do?
Those two specifically?
Or anyone in general. Those are just the two that popped into my mind because of how many they do with other breweries.
Yeah, we've collaborated with Sun King, New Belgium, Castle Island, Melvin, Green Cheek in Orange, not quite Anaheim. And collaborations, the way that they come together, it's a little bit Boulevard, Highwire. And the way they come together is sort of connectivity. So I've never spent much time in Texas. So I don't know the Jester King guys, but I love all of the beer that I've had. and I follow them on Instagram, and I want to go see their farm campus because it's rad. And we're not traveling right now. So yes, we're open-minded about collaborations, but 1 or 2 a year, we feel like is the right amount. It's, running a 3-legged race is less efficient than running a 2-legged race, but they're rewarding because you can push each other out of each other's comfort zones and you can learn a lot from each other. So absolutely, we're into that. I don't know anyone from Bottle Logic, but I'm Bryant at Rhinegeist.com, and that's how a lot of collaborations start in our world.
I definitely have some contacts of a lot of breweries, so I'll make sure that Rhinegeist and whoever else you may need comes your way, being like, hey, what's going on when this whole COVID shit ends? We'd love to make a beer with you guys. I am curious about the choice to get into cider, and if you guys do anything else with the winemaker's license, like if you guys are doing wine, mead, seltzer, which I mean is more beer. But what are you doing with these non-beer beverages over at Rhinegeist?
I spent a semester in London and fell in love with cider over there. We started making ciders because we felt like it fleshed out our portfolio, and there weren't a lot of really tasty ones available. So we came with semi-dry and dry hopped back in, I want to say 2015. And dry hopped, I think hopping cider is not, if you like hops, you drink IPAs. And if you like cider, you drink cider. So we probably would have been better served just to go with a dry cider and not a dry hop cider, but we were, hopped up on a lot of ideas. And since then we've evolved it into, Swizzle, which is a lemongrass ginger. And then we're coming with a seasonal program there. I think cider is a space where there's a lot of space for creativity. And we love being creative and being innovative. And we like the fact that you can't drink beer all the time. I think most of us as millennials plus, but we're drinking, even at this virtual table, we're drinking beer, we're drinking cider, we're drinking vodka and bourbon aged in beer barrels. But, there's a drinking across the spectrum that happens, and there's a beyond beer. You bring up seltzer. It's an amazing category that didn't exist 3 years ago, and is now the size of imported beer. So I think that was in 2015 was a novel approach to focus our innovation in a different direction. And I enjoy cider. We have a lot of cider drinkers in our ranks. And that was really what we did.
We get a lot of really knowledgeable, intelligent people who have been in the industry, and you've been on probably every single facet of the industry. Between sales, you've brewed your own beers, owning a brewery. I am, not me personally, the royal I am coming up to you, and I am interested in starting a brewery. What is one thing you would tell me to look out for, worry about, pay attention to as I go into this next step? What's something you wish someone told you? It's a very deep question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're 8 years old. When we started, there were 2,000 breweries, and now there are 5 times that. So I would say it's more competitive than it's ever been. It's a great place, but it is a place that is challenging. When I hire, and I'm not hands-on in the hiring process with everyone these days, but for 6 years I would hire a salesperson and I would ask them, do you love beer? Like, really? Like, your life is going to revolve around this. How much do you like beer? And you don't have to worship beer, but if you don't love it enough to be committed to working your ass off for this product, that just if it was toilet paper, I'm out. I'm not as excited. And I know that, or a vacuum. There's a lot of products, most products. So I think you've got to really be committed, because there's a chance that there's very little rewards and there's a lot of arduous effort there. But if let's say you had all the money in the world, fundraising is a challenging thing. I think making sure you have an idea of how you're going to differentiate yourself in 10,000 breweries, that's really critical. So like, it's got to matter to you, and it's got to be not just like a way you think you could get out of your cubicle. It's, you got to love the beer. The beer is the vehicle. We haven't talked a ton about beer. We've talked more about the industry and about that's what tends to happen. But beer is how we operate. Everyone in leadership in our brewery cares about beer. They understand it and they appreciate it, and that really helps things go. And when Nick brought up our website feels corporate to me is like this styrofoam tasting structure that gets things done for efficiency's sake, not because anybody cares. And that's the antithesis of what we want to do. So once again, I don't know if I answered your question, but you better love it, and you better have an idea of what your angle is.
Here's what I would say to answer the question is that would you tell yourself that in 2010? Because that's really, the origin of when you were looking to start Rhinegeist is 2009, 2010. Is that something you would tell yourself to make sure you love beer?
Yeah, I mean,
there's no wrong answer.
I mean, 8 years later, and it's Friday night, and I'm hanging out with strangers talking about beer. Like, I love this shit, right? Like, if you had asked me that then, yes.
Well, you probably would have thought maybe you were at a bar talking with strangers, drinking beer, as opposed to maybe with a brewery. I know Wendy has one more question for you, so I'm going to pass it off to her.
So, speaking of beer, I'm just curious, what is the beer that you guys have made that you are most proud of?
Like picking your favorite child. I don't have children, but I would imagine that's hard.
Well, if not a favorite, like maybe Wendy, would it be okay if it's like there's one that sticks out the most? That if it's not necessarily like one that you're most proud of, but one that comes like when someone says, name a beer, what's like one of the most common one you go to the most?
Yeah, I'll give you two. One is Uncle, which is a British mild that was one of the first 4 beers that we opened up with. And it's a style that's just nobody cares about, but we loved. You can make a really flavorful, awesome, complex, malty beer. And I was like, tour guide and giving tours on Sundays when I drank too much all week. And like a 3.8% beer that has great flavor is an awesome beer in those instances.
I'll have to cut you off real quick and just ask, have you had Ghetto Blaster out of Motor City Brewing Works?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's our like level of English milds here in Michigan is that beer.
Yeah. So Uncle's one, and then yeah, I mean that's as good of an answer. I mean, we brewed a beer called Mathlete, which is a low-cal IPA, which could be a passing trend, but we were just, if you want to drink, I don't drink for calorie counting. So, and most of us don't at the brewery. Like, that's not how you get into beer, but we appreciate that this is an emergent category. So like, let's compete in the space. We came up with Mathlete, which is 115 calories, which is not the lowest calorie, but we felt like it was as low as we could get, but still have flavor and that we want to drink it. We worked hard with what hops we could put in there and how do we put hops in there so that there's enough hop flavor and it balances. So Mathlete is a low-cal IPA. It's going to come out in a 12-pack in January. And it's an awesome, goofy, retro branded beer that's for the geeks in us. And I wasn't a great student, but I was a geeky kid, and a lot of us were at the brewery. So Mathlete, and my business partner is like pivot chart wizard, loves Excel, was a Mathlete, literally. And so we, did this as like kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke for Bob, but it's an awesome beer that I can't drink just one of, and it's one that excites me, and I can't wait till it comes out again. So those are two right now. Like a lot of, I don't know. I mean, I'm on innovation, so I'm thinking about what are we going to do next year, And the last beer that just got launched, I want to go drink in our tap room. I want to evaluate it. I want to talk about how it can be better the next time we do it. So like I'm that ADHD, I'm always on to the next, and I always want to make things better. So it's hard to choose your favorite, I guess. But Uncle and Mathlete, like you could sequester me to Cyprus and I'd be okay with those two beers.
I think a lot of people enjoy those lower ABV beers because they're looking not necessarily for the buzz, but the flavor mixed in with the buzz. They want something tasty, easy to drink, something that they could crush, but also they're not going to get completely tanked. Like I saw a barrel aged Uncle that was like a 13% English mild or something like that on
Drunkle?
Untapped. Yeah, Drunkle.
Yeah, that's a different speed.
Yeah, I did not expect that huge of a beer when I saw English mild. I know Nick has one more question. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Nick ask that question. We're gonna end the show, and if you don't mind, we're gonna play a little game at the end of the show. After everything's done, called King of the Hill. You're welcome to stay for it. It's simple, easy, should only take about 10 minutes. But the choice is up to you. But Nick, ask away. You're going to finish off this show.
You had mentioned maybe Michigan in the future, maybe not Texas, maybe not California. But aside from distribution, where do you see Rhinegeist short term, the next 12, 24 months, where hopefully we'll be out of COVID by then, and then maybe even long term, the 5, 6, 10 years? Where do you see it as in the position that you're in? Where do you see it in the short term and in the long term?
We are moving into an ESOP. We had planned to do that this summer, and COVID put a kibosh on a lot of plans we had this year. It's going to be sort of a lost year, is what I keep calling it, because all the plans we all laid out this year didn't come to fruition. So hopefully next year we're better positioned to do that. We will be an ESOP next year. So over the next 5 and 10 years, an employee-owned brewery is taking some of the profits we make and investing them in our employees' retirements, which puts the people that are making the beer and working their ass off every day in the position of accreting wealth from those efforts in the long run, which is a really valuable way for us to go about operating. We feel like the quality and the consistency and the levels of innovation that we have are what we want to continue to build a brand around. We want to continue making an impact on community. I mean, I don't know, like at a top level, what's going to be different or what our goals are, but like, I really like what we're doing. And the world is such a divisive place. I love beer's role as bringing people together. The 6 of us are just hanging out because of this beautiful, simple yet complex thing that we make. And cheers to that. So I don't have a great answer. We don't have global domination plans. We're not going to sell out. We've never entertained that. That's not what this is about. And we are in the position of being able to, there's a lot, we don't talk politics here, but like to work your whole life and then not have anything to show for it is like not what society should be built to hand out. So the fact that we have a brand that 300 people at this point have contributed to what it means and what it is, to have them benefit from it, and not just a handful of us that happen to be more risk seeking than the rest, is really satisfying. And Jeff Bezos is on record for saying he's envious of breweries because they're the longest companies that last in the world. Around the world, breweries in Europe and Russia are still existing generation upon a generation. Well, if we have a company that is owned by employees and just buys out old employees with newer employees, that is a great community partner for Cincinnati, and builds and makes a great product and is still innovative over the next 10 years. Like, that's the model. So I can't really define what that looks like because things are changing so rapidly, but that's the rudder that we hold onto. And it's great people making a great product and caring about each other and their community.
That's a solid answer. I'm going to sneak in one more question, though, because a gentleman who listens to us live wanted to ask a question of you. And I think it's probably an easier question, hopefully short answer. If it's long, it's okay. Is there a marketing term or brewing technique that you find customers misinterpret?
That's a great question. I don't know that anyone knows what double dry hopping means. Do
Well,
you dry hop something twice?
you know
Did you
what? Why don't
put month in there?
we will finish the show? Why don't you tell us what double dry hopping means? To you, at least.
To me, it I don't think we've used the terminology because it's so amorphous. We dry hop to the degree that we make a beer that we like, and if it takes dry hopping it twice, we don't put that on the label.
I got double dry hopped dinghy from you.
Okay, all right. So that's a beer dinghy that we then dry hop again with a different hop.
I
So
got double dry hopped truth.
right, once again, so those are one off, like one keg at a time, €1, which is 8 barrels at a time. So when we say double dry hop, we mean truth gets dry hopped. So it is truth. And then on top of that, we dry hop it again with usually a prominent hop like a Citra or an Azaka or something that's not usually in that beer.
And for people who don't understand, what does dry hopping mean?
Dry hopping is hops are added post fermentation so that you don't extract the bitterness, which is what you do when you put it into the boil or the whirlpool. You extract more of the bitterness and the flavor there, but they're added post fermentation so that you extract the aromatic qualities. And that is one of the contributing factors to IPAs. I mean, when you crack that beer open and you smell that citrus and that tropical and that dank character, it's the hops that were added last because aroma is the most volatile. If you leave beer in your car trunk, it may taste fine, but the aroma is probably, as soon as you crack that can, it's going to go. So the most volatile compounds are also the most important, we would say, because IPA's aroma is all part of the process. So that's what dry hopping means. We dry hop liberally, and we love it, and we love hops.
All right. Well, that's going to do it. Better on Draft 242. Bryant, thank you so much for joining us. If you stick around live, or if you check us out on IGTV, we're going to be playing the King of the Hill. But for those of you listening to podcast, no news this week. We're just going to have a two-part episode as you have listened to part 2 while you're listening to this right now. With Bryant, we appreciate you joining us. That's going to do it. So North Center Brewing over in Northville, Michigan. Go check them out. Zatuna Liquor over in Rochester Hills. If you're watching the video, I think I can do it here. Hold on. We got betterondraft.com, Better on Draft on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and Bod Podcast on Untapped and, of course, Twitch. That's the nice little poster I've got on the video right behind me. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.